through. Check, check, 1, 2. Let's see. I think we're good on that front. Right, and then are we good on this front here? Right, and then are we good on... Yes, we are. And we are live, fully running, and ready to go. Welcome back, everybody, on yet another episode on the series that just can't stop coming back, which is the exposure of Hydee Feldstein Soto, the current Los Angeles city attorney, who is involved in countless number of scandals. And today I'm going to walk you through yet another one of her scandals. There's a beautifully written article. If you don't care to listen through the entire stream, no problem, I got you. I'm going to be posting a link to this whole Substack article that you can actually go and watch and read for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat right now. Let's go ahead and just make sure that I have it in every stream here. Right, make sure it's on there. So there you go, everybody. You can go ahead and click on that link for the Substack. I just started the Substack and it has everything that I'm going to talk about today and more. It has links to documents, or actually it has links to videos. It has photos of documents. It has links to other channels. Everything you could ever possibly want to know about what we're going to discuss today on the stream. You could just skip it all if you want to and read the article. But without further ado, let's get right into it and explain a little background for those that don't know who Hydee is and what her role is within the city of Los Angeles. So the way that the city of Los Angeles works is that it is separated into two distinct entities for how they handle criminal cases. On one side, you have the district attorney's office, which is beholden to the county, and it is a publicly elected position. So the district attorney's office right now just had their new district attorney assume office. His name is Nathan Hochman, just at the close of last year. And right now, we actually have elections coming up for Los Angeles for the city attorney's office. And the way that the city attorney's office works is that they are the office that actually prosecutes misdemeanor cases, whereas the district attorney's office is the one that prosecutes felony cases. But not only that, we actually have a lot more responsibility. There's actually a lot more responsibility than meets the eye when we talk about the city attorney's office. So the city attorney's office, one of their big responsibilities, like I said, is to prosecute criminal cases. Yes, of course, that's all well and good, but it does not end there. So on another hand, they actually staff each and every city committee as well as every city commission with a deputy city attorney to preside over the meeting to make sure that the meetings are run lawfully, smoothly, and obey procedure. So this includes your regular city council meetings that are held 3 times a week. This includes all the different committees like budget and finance, like transportation, energy and environment, so on and so forth. It also includes, like I said, the commissions. For example, you have the Commission on Disability and countless other commissions that are run within the city. So they staff each and every one of those meetings with a deputy city attorney to make sure that the rules are followed. For example, that there's enough board members present to actually have a meeting. And if there aren't, then there has to be a declaration as such and follow up, that meeting minutes are officially taken and recorded, and so on. So that's another leg of what the city attorney's office is responsible for, in addition to criminal prosecutions. But not only that, in addition, the city attorney's office is also responsible for any and all litigation against the city. So when anybody wants to sue the city, it is in fact the city attorney's office that defends the city in court. So if somebody's filing a civil case against the city, That is, in fact, the responsibility of the city attorney to completely manage that entire litigation. But not only that, okay, not only that. I feel like I'm one of those old ShamWow commercials. But wait, there's more. In fact, all of the policies that the city of Los Angeles has in regards to homelessness, in regards to making contracts with different businesses for all sorts of programs and services, whether it be providing shelters, whether it be providing construction of a park, and screening out which vendors are going to actually supply the concrete, do the mixing, supply the labor, and overseeing that whole entire contract. That is also the responsibility of the city attorney's office, which means definitively that every policy right now under Karen Bass, for example, and all of the contracts that they have with all the different hotels and other shelters as part of the Inside Safe program, the city attorney's office has absolutely, positively, 100% reviewed each and every one of those contracts and blessed it into law. So those are the 4 pillars that the city attorney's office is responsible. But if you thought that was the end of it, just wait. There's more, because of course there is. The 5th and final leg of the city attorney's office is actually to also prosecute corporate entities that violate the law, such as environmental laws. So if a company, for example, is dumping waste illegally and not tracking it, that is actually the city attorney's office's responsibility to prosecute those agencies and the individuals therein and hold them accountable to the law. And of course, it does not end there. They're also responsible for prosecuting criminal misconduct and other various sorts of civil misconduct of various city officials. So, for example, if in fact you have a city council member cutting somebody's microphone off during public comment period, that is actually the city attorney's office's responsibility to prosecute individual officials within the city that are doing corrupt behavior and misdeeds. They are actually supposed to prosecute them, and as an oversight to make sure that the city attorney's office and the city attorney herself is doing her job, we actually have the district attorney's office, where Nathan Hochman and his deputies are actually also legally responsible for making sure that if Hydee doesn't do her job, that she is prosecuted, as well as the deputies inside the office are also prosecuted, in addition, of course, to the actual city officials that did the misconduct in the first place. So there's layers of accountability, there's layers of interwovenness into this governance structure to make sure that not just one part, but 2 parts are held responsible for whenever they goof up, which inevitably, of course, being LA, they always goof up. That's the norm in Los Angeles, right? In the city of Los Angeles, there are the biggest heists, the biggest crime, the biggest scams, and not because the weather is nice, not because this got one of the best series of food, not because some of the views are great, but frankly because all of the corruption is 100% stamped, sanctioned, and approved by the government itself. The city of Los Angeles government officials are absolutely, positively, abhorrently corrupt to the bone, and there's frankly they know it. And they know it, and they don't care that the people know it, and it is something that they get off on. Absolutely scamming the public, taking their money, and defrauding people with fraudulent programs, claiming to help homeless people, claiming to alleviate poverty, but at the same time, right in their face, actually stealing that money and laundering it through nonprofits that line the pockets of private personal interests and actually do nothing to help the people who truly need it. The people that are dying literally every day on the streets, and all of the CEOs and other upper management that are involved in this giant racketeering scheme, which at the end of the day, when we take a look at Los Angeles, that racketeering scheme is quite simply real estate. Okay? There's an old saying that what's the number one thing that no matter how many years down the road people are always going to need? It's land. It's real estate. And that's the name of the game in the city of Los Angeles. All the developers and all the city officials are in giant cahoots to continue essentially taking all that public real estate and laundering it over to be held more and more in private hands, and then bleed the city dry of however they can, whether it be through management fees, whether it be through bogus policies claiming to create beds and shelters and all this other sort of stuff that just frankly doesn't exist to help Angelenos. That is what is truly at play with the city of Los Angeles, and that is what Hydee Feldstein Soto is responsible for managing and ensuring that it doesn't happen, and that inevitably when it does, that it's prosecuted as such. And of course, when she fails, of course, that the district attorney steps in. And then the final level of accountability, of course, is the Department of Justice to prosecute both corrupt officials at the city level, as well as potentially corrupt federal agents at the federal level within that district. So without further ado, I'm going to jump straight into today's article here. And again, like I said, if you don't care to listen to the podcast, no problem. I got you covered. Everything that we're going to talk about today is actually in this Substack article. And I want to take a step back and actually do sort of a look back in time to try to better understand what kind of a person, based on her upbringing, that Hydee Soto is, right? How is it that she got to the office of the city attorney? And I don't just mean by the voting process of getting there. I mean, what actually motivates somebody to go and run for city attorney? What sort of background and expertise does she have that's potentially relevant or maybe even irrelevant? And some of the things that actually make for a good city attorney overall, a good prosecutor, a good public servant. Because again, remember, at the end of the day, we're talking about a publicly elected position. We're talking about a public official being funded on the public dime who took an oath, swore that oath to make sure that they defend the city of LA against not only upholding the Constitution, but against any acts of domestic terrorism as well, including that of which committed by city council members, be it in the form of financial fraud or otherwise. That is the oath that Hydee Feldstein Soto and her predecessors before her have sworn an oath to. And we're going to talk about today, frankly, how she has utterly, miserably failed to uphold that oath, and some of the upbringing that might have resulted in really contributing to get a better understanding of what makes somebody like Hydee behave the way she does, be so reckless, and frankly not have a care for the Angelenos. And so in order to do that, we need to go take a look back in time with really Hydee's childhood past. And for those of you that don't know, for those of you that have never seen a news or press conference with Hydee, it's actually quite interesting. Every time that Hydee Feldstein Soto is up on a public press conference, one of the first things that she says immediately is making sure that people know that she is Los Angeles' first ever female Latino to ever be elected in the into position, as if that somehow is some sort of qualifier, right? What you got to understand about LA is that there's so much identity politics played, and it's played in some of the worst huckstering sort of ways. It's quite literally one of the most, I would say, if not racist, but also quite hateful of diverse communities, especially compared to what other places in America that people consider to be a boiling pot. If you talk about cities like New York City, Seattle, and so forth, and see how diverse they are compared to a very well-known international city like Los Angeles, you would be surprised at how very low on the welcoming and diverse scale that Los Angeles is. And it has this sort of stereotype that people think of, well, isn't Los Angeles just, so extremely left and super woke and progressive? And the real answer is actually hell no. Anybody that's spent any actual time here and gotten to know, they will quickly realize just how extremely conservative and far right wing the politicians here are. But it's this it's this veil, this illusion that they keep playing to give off this perception that they are progressive, that they're forward thinking, that they have some sort of democratic values behind them. But really, it's got nothing to do with Democratic or Republican. By and large, LA just has extremely authoritarian, totalitarian, highly dictatorial government officials that will stop at nothing and use every tyrannical means necessary and possible to quash your freedoms and just take advantage of the public, defraud everybody, and not feel any sort of remorse for it. And so it's with that understanding that you need to go into to be able to fathom just how bad not only things in LA today are, but some of the culture at the government level that's helped enable some of that. And that's really the true story of LA. And people, you know, again, when they think about LA, they really are thinking about some of the illusions put out there by some of the more progressive areas of Hollywood. But again, that's not really what LA is. And especially when you talk about the level of wealth that's present in LA, really that's you're looking at very exceptionally high net worth individuals. And the fact of the matter is a lot of these folks do not want to make sure that they don't want anybody else to have any sort of wealth generation. And so it's this sort of race to the bottom of hoarding as much wealth as possible and using the government to whatever extent they possibly can to make sure that happens. So one of the things that we're actually going to get into is the history of Hydee Feldstein Soto and how exactly she even came to be a lawyer in the first place, and then eventually the city attorney. So again, now that we've covered this backdrop that Hydee loves to give about herself, where she's, you know, the first ever Latina woman to be in the city attorney's position. Her roots actually started off with her father, who was a lawyer himself. And he's actually well known for a particular case in Martinez Rodriguez v. Jimenez in Puerto Rico. It's a case filed in August 1975, presided over by Judge Juan Corolla. And if I butchered that last name, I apologize. But basically, this is a case where there's horrific conditions at a jailhouse, and her father, actually, Stanley L. Feldstein, he actually stood up and did a fantastic job of making sure that this highly, highly unkempt and frankly corrupt jail system was dismantled. And in fact, he was able to achieve that. So his co-lawyers beside him were Roberto Busso, Rafael Bach, and Francisco Romo. And it was the San Juan District Jail, also known as La Princesa. And basically, the outcome of this case was that after a multi-day trial hearing and a physical inspection of the jail by the judge, which occurred around February 1976, it was determined, the court determined that there was extreme overcrowding in the jail. There was even minors housed with adults, rampant violence and sexual abuse, severe understaffing, people sleeping on the floors, and essentially what you can best describe as an environment equal to a dungeon without a bed. The judge concluded basically that La Princesa jail was totally unfit and inadequate to operate as a jail. And so the court therefore actually ordered a permanent injunctive relief over the jail administration, where they specifically shut down La Princesa on a set timetable. The district court opinion was given actually on my birthday, interestingly enough, and the date to be closed was as such. The case summary that we have from that case basically states that it was to be closed around mid-1976. The Commonwealth of Puerto Rico just tried to get an appeal, but the First Circuit denied it back in June 3rd, 1976. And again, hats off to Stanley L. Feldstein, where he was actually able to get attorney's fees for the plaintiffs that brought forward this suit on March 23rd, 1977. And frankly, as far as civil cases go, that's a pretty fast turnaround. We're talking about 2 years overall, and such a great closure to the end of it all, where you have abhorrent conditions, frankly similar to some of the disgusting acts that Los Angeles knows very well at the hands of ex-sheriff Lee Baca, who was actually convicted for much of this misdeeds within the LA County Sheriff's jails. Notorious for all sorts of disgusting abuse towards inmates. And so that's actually quite a noble case that he was involved with. Hydee has actually also repeatedly remarked about her father. She's remarked that he was a significant factor in her decision to embark as a lawyer. And she basically followed in her father's footsteps. She worked primarily as a bank lawyer, a corporate lawyer, as they sometimes say. And then she was officially sworn in as city attorney back in December 2022. Most interesting, though, that I find is that prior to her assuming the office, she had actually retired from being a corporate lawyer for the last decade. So she had taken quite a bit of time off from the profession overall before assuming the role of city attorney. So she had worked her entire life exclusively as a banking lawyer. We can actually see some of her history with banking and corporate law. One of the things that the Michelle McGinnis case clearly shows is that Hydee was actually one of the lead lawyers for the Arthur Andersen accounting firm, which, again, for those of you that don't know, she served during the same time period where the Enron Corporation had employed Arthur Andersen Accounting Company to commit its wide-scale financial fraud. And that's a very key piece of information to keep in the back of your mind. Very, very key. But most interesting, at least to me, when I see instances of deep-seated corruption, and we'll get into some of the examples here in just a bit, of people like Hydee Soto, who had a great mentor, a very powerful, well-respected attorney, and role model for a father to grow up and essentially, learn from. How is it that she goes from that to running political favors to maliciously prosecute anybody that the cult of Scientology tells her to? And on that same note, how is it that she does not prosecute violent offenders that are either Scientologists or agents of Scientology in the past year and a half? How is it that having all of this great privilege, all of this great access to mentorship, resources, information, counselors left and right, access that nobody would really, that the vast majority of people do not have, how is it that we land from and as she describes her own mother as well, a very devout Catholic, how is it that we go from a culturally conservative household with all sorts of great mentors to now somebody that is weaponizing the institution of justice to target selectively for political reasons people that are trying to speak out against a series of great injustice, really, that has been going on for far too long in the city of LA. Well, that's really what got me most interested in writing this piece. And I wanted to explain actually in this video some of the factors that we can actually see leading up to and causing some of those points. So one of the things I want to talk about is, again, what are some of those factors that can lead somebody to go down that path? Well, interestingly enough, when somebody is born into that much privilege, even though they're guided by mentors, they still come out the other end as leading this life of protecting the system at all costs. And here's some of the ways that they can justify essentially running political favors for a child trafficking cult. You got to understand how the human mind, how the human psyche works, where they try to compartmentalize how such behavior is acceptable morally, legally, and otherwise. And some of the ways that happens is these early grooming into power structures, which can sometimes lead children of very respectable families, such as that of Hydee's, essentially being quietly brought into networks of influence where, ethics and legality are just in a very gray area, and they're understood more so as a tool of loyalty to the group rather than overall universal moral principles. These networks, of course, they can include elite schools, political circles, or even corporate mentorships, especially when you're just out of school and you're looking for that first job. That's essentially where you can be primed to look and learn that law and morality are simply tools to achieve whatever means you want to, not constraints. They're not roadblocks or things to stop and consider, but rather tools to help you overcome and achieve whatever end you wish to, and however you wish to. Other times, people like Hydee, who are in such high levels of privilege, can actually frequently practice what they call moral compartmentalization, where essentially they believe themselves to be ethical, while really what they're doing is committing large-scale harm. But so long as they see their role as protecting a greater system, aka the state, the city, the economy, national security, etc., it's justified. So, for example, in the context of Hydee, this would 100% come off as her self-perception that she has, and she's stated this publicly repeatedly, as being a defender of the city, defending the city and sticking up for the city. But the funny part is, this is so hypocritical and just riddled with dogma. She has such a proven track record of refusing to prosecute corrupt city council members who are quite literally today and in moments past under her tenure actively committing fraud particularly through homeless programs, and she hasn't done a thing about it. She hasn't prosecuted them. She hasn't gone forward with any statements. She hasn't testified to Congress. She's actually been there at the helm of leading much of this contract negotiation and essentially helping and enabling them to do it. So that's one aspect, right? So she's also lobbied very actively, I might add, for laws to limit liability payouts for victims. And you can actually see this most interestingly in the video interview that takes place at the Sherman Oaks Homeowner Association, where she is interviewed by a member of the association, but also there was an open discussion where people from the public could ask questions. And one of the things that she was confronted on is why she has been repeatedly trying to limit how much of a payout the city gives to victims, especially, for example, like those of Michelle McGinnis, who were wrongfully fired for being a whistleblower, or those people that are victims of excessive force by the LAPD. She wants to limit how much those victims get. And that's just absolutely horrible. And luckily, so far, all of her attempts have actually miserably failed. It's something that Karen Bass has actually been challenged on as well. And if you haven't watched it already, I highly recommend you watch that interview. It's it's on the article here, so you don't need to remember it. But that's, again, another aspect to show the hypocrisy that she has this track record of not helping protect, not helping defend, but instead being one of the perpetrators. And of course, recently in the past year, running political favors for the biggest, most notorious child trafficking cult there is, the cult of Scientology, where she has repeatedly and aggressively gone after anybody that dares criticize Scientology with meritless charges, arrests, and nothing against the agents of Scientology that are actually doing and causing the harm, but everything towards the protesters, everything towards the people that dare speak out against Scientology, everything towards the favor of Scientology. And again, one of the things that hopefully you'll see with this article is that Hydee just has this pattern of trying to rationalize and cover up her atrocities as sort of necessary evils, right? And sometimes children growing up in circumstances like her may have also witnessed actual high-level authority figures even bending or breaking laws without any sort of consequence. And from the child's perspective, sometimes they can conclude that, well, you know, legality is nothing but optics. This is really just turning morality into nothing but a PR strategy rather than any sort of personal code that you live to and aspire to and actually uphold. And often what this does to somebody, or can do, is it can lead to a result from shifting your individual morality to simply being the systemic loyalty. Whatever the system, whatever the party says is okay, you take as okay, and that's how you justify it to yourself. And frankly, especially as an immigrant myself, this does make sense in cultures and ethnic groups that have been historically known to, in fact, be systemically persecuted, especially like that of Latinos and the Jews. It's very well documented that survivors of such horrific circumstances can actually be quite more susceptible to adopting a sort of highly tribalistic and exclusionary mindset that is very, very weary of anybody that's perceived to be on the outside, right? Or they're not in the in-group, and so we don't welcome them. We don't welcome their ideas, especially. And so that's something to keep in mind. And of course, this again can really help explain how a law-abiding child, somebody that's born into privilege, can become essentially a crime facilitator if their profession ultimately is rewarding the bending of rules for some sort of strategic advantage, whether that be getting better interest rates and return on investment for homeless program fraud, or getting campaign donations from private entities like Scientology when you're running for re-election. All of that is justified for this for the mere sake of getting a advantage when you run for office. This is especially true, doubly so for those that actually grow up in privilege, because not only that, but they actually understand, and even more dangerously so, they can actually access structural immunity, right? And what I mean by that is we talk, there's a lot of talk often in the news about how police officers, when they commit horrible acts to other people that is in no way justified and is clearly breaking the law, how they hide under this veil of qualified immunity that, oh, well, I'm with the government, so therefore it doesn't count. Well, that's somebody it really rings true for somebody like Hydee, where they have access to high-end lawyers, political allies, offshore systems, and essentially can try to run a controlled narrative in the press, right? But not this time. But it's, you know, something that she will most certainly continue to do, and I know for a fact is trying to do, but frankly, this time, the timing with her is just not the best, and she really, really screwed it all up for herself on blatantly prosecuting maliciously and selectively just for the behest of Scientology, myself being one of those people. And it just makes them, frankly, overall highly insulated from their consequences, which explains how these large-scale crimes enacted, right, the collusion of Hydee with the LAPD, with Scientology in a political fashion. It makes sense, and it explains how these large-scale crimes can occur in a way that is very, very out of reach for most people. So with that little explanation out of the way, I just want to very briefly dive into, again, a whole recap of a timeline in the last year and a half of Hydee's involvement with Scientology. And I want to take you first almost all the way at the beginning, starting at December 2023, when the LAPD, specifically the Hollywood division, actually issued out a public statement from their public information office, explicitly labeling all who protest Scientology, particularly people like William Good and Jessica Paul-Medessa, as part of some sort of what they claim to be a violent criminal gang. And that verbiage is something that Scientology actually wanted LAPD to use at their behest. And you will see in some of the other frivolous cases that people have won against Scientology, they keep coming back to that same verbiage of it's a gang. And it's miserably failed on their part, but not for a lack of trying. They've definitely tried. But again, sadly for them, the truth continues to prevail. And so that's the backdrop to all of this, that we begin to see the compartmentalization and the justification, the rationalization of going forward with some of these criminal acts of targeting the Scientology critics. And so with that, we'll go next to the period just after that letter is released. And just give me 1 second here. I want to see what comes after this. Okay, so the period right following that, we see quite a number of violent acts being committed towards the protesters. So we have activists William Good, Cameron Marino, Aaron Smith-Levin, Daniel Gonzalez, Scott. We have Jessica Paul-Medessa, Confident Chris, and all these other folks that have been victims of very horrific acts by Scientologists or agents of Scientology. And it's gone on for quite a bit. And even actually before December, there was quite a number of other injustices. But this is really when things are starting to very much ramp up. Where in the case of William, for example, he was brutally battered by a Scientology agent just outside the La Poubelle restaurant, to the point of where his nose was broken. He was bleeding profusely. And even after the LAPD showed up and the perpetrator who violently attacked William at no fault of William's, totally unprovoked, the perpetrator who attacked William was being hidden and safeguarded by Scientology inside the La Poubelle restaurant. After William submitted a police report and requested a PPA, that person was never charged. They were never arrested. And at the very least, that is something, even if it wasn't to be a felony, that is something that Hydee Feldstein Soto absolutely should have prosecuted and had the absolute authority and power to do so. But yet she turned a blind eye. A man was literally beaten so bad that his nose was bleeding and broken. And Hydee saw nothing wrong with that. She saw that as totally okay and acceptable, specifically because it was an agent of Scientology that did it. Not only that, Jessica, during the same period, has also been repeatedly stalked and harassed by various Scientology agents. And in fact, one of them, there's literally a video clip of him being spoken to by one of the Scientology security guards over at the Celebrity Center, or Info Center, over at the Hollywood Boulevard. He's known as Scooter Guy, where they were literally on video, okay, giving him money, talking about giving him money to continue his acts of harassment and stalking and violence overall. That's the kind of stuff that Hydee should go after to protect Angelenos. That's the kind of stuff that makes it dangerous to protest. But that's exactly what the type of behavior that Hydee encourages, that Hydee will absolve Scientology of. And that's exactly why things remained so dangerous, right? We have another victim who, just like William, was also brutally attacked. Confident Chris was horrifically assaulted by very clearly an agent of Scientology, where he actually was sent to the hospital and ended up having teeth broken as a result of it. But Hydee saw nothing wrong with that. She saw no need to further investigate. She saw no need to prosecute. She saw no need to put Scientology on the hot seat. Hydee agrees that an innocent young man having his teeth broken and essentially left to die on the streets is totally okay. That it's okay for Scientology to violently attack people, bloodied and left on the streets for dead, that's okay. This is the kind of behavior that is absolutely sickening, but Hydee Feldstein Soto continues to condone. She continues to say this is okay. She continues to make sure that Scientology never gets prosecuted or charged. And I'll leave this video with this for you guys to chew on. The Michelle McGinnis case, when you take a look at some of the discovery in that case, it very clearly states as one of the memos that Hydee has actually passed around internally. And again, shout out to Michelle McGinnis. Thank God we have whistleblowers like her wanting to make sure that, you know, justice is done and done by we the people, and that these corrupt officials are held to lawful accountability. Right, we're all about following the law here and making sure that accountability is done through the law. This memo shows Hydee Feldstein Soto as telling her deputies that, quote, we do not prosecute corporate defendants, meaning corrupt criminal rackets like Scientology, she will not criminally prosecute. Corrupt developers that are bleeding the city dry and driving up rents, she will not prosecute. And this is the legacy that Hydee Feldstein Soto has left herself. A person who came from absolute privilege, had all of the resources, wealth, mentors that anybody could ever possibly want or ask for, and yet somehow she turned to a life of systemic crime at the highest level, at the highest order. And it's absolutely shameful. And so with that, I'm going to leave it here for this installment. I appreciate everybody showing up. I'll see you in the next episode. And if you haven't checked it out already, be sure to check out that article. Like, subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.